In 1975, a studio engineer made a catastrophic mistake that accidentally forged one of rock's most legendary sounds. But that wasn't the strangest twist in Phil Lynott's story. This mixed-race outsider constructed his entire Irish identity through pure poetry. His biggest hit was inspired by Manchester gangsters and nearly rejected by his own label. Then heroin addiction turned his music into a heartbreaking confession diary, while self-sabotage destroyed their shot at American stardom. This is how Ireland's first rock poet became a tragic legend. Our story begins not in the pubs of Dublin, but in West Bromwich, England, where Philip Paris Lynott was born in 1949. His mother, Philomena, was Irish. In post-war Britain, being a single mother of a mixed-race child meant facing immense hardship and prejudice. When Phil was just 4 years old, Philomena made the heart-wrenching decision to send her son to live with her parents in Crumlin, a working-class neighborhood of Dublin. This separation would plant the seeds of loneliness that would later define both his art and his life. Picture this: in the largely white, conservative Ireland of the 1960s, young Phil stood out like a beacon. His grandparents, Frank and Sarah, even tried to mitigate the social stigma by pretending Phil was the son of a friend. But the charade fooled no one. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Classmates would touch his hair out of curiosity, mistakenly assuming he was from Africa. While his mother had experienced overt prejudice in England, Phil's experience in Ireland was characterized by what historians call benign incomprehension. Not hostility, but a constant reminder that he was different. But here's where the magic begins. Despite poor grades in Irish and history at Scoil Calm Christian Brothers School, Phil filled notebook after notebook with poetry. He wasn't born with an innate sense of Celtic heritage. He actively constructed it through his art. This young outsider was about to transform his perceived weakness into immense creative power. Phil's transformation from poetic dreamer to rock showman was swift. In 1965, at just 16, he became the lead singer for his first band, the Black Eagles. But it was with Skid Row where he truly found his stage presence, even though he didn't play an instrument. Here's a detail that reveals his character. Phil would smear boot polish under his eyes during performances to draw attention to himself. This wasn't vanity, it was survival. A young man who felt invisible his entire life was determined to be seen. When Skid Row effectively sacked him, guitarist Brendan "Brush" Shields felt so guilty that he taught Phil to play bass guitar. That act of kindness would change rock history. The bass became Phil's sonic signature, the foundation for everything that followed. Along with his childhood friend, drummer Brian Downey, Phil formed Orphanage, the direct precursor to Thin Lizzy. The pieces were falling in place, but success would prove elusive. The early years of Thin Lizzy were a masterclass in frustration. Their 1971 self-titled debut, Commercial Apathy. The 1972 follow-up, Shades of a Blue Orphanage, more of the same. By the time Vagabonds of the Western World also failed to chart, Decca Records was ready to drop them. Their manager, Chris O'Donnell, was fighting for their survival. The band was on the verge of extinction. Then came what Phil would later call both a blessing and a curse. Without the band's knowledge or consent, Decca released their version of the traditional Irish ballad Whiskey in the Jar as a single. It was an overnight sensation, #1 in Ireland, #6 in the UK in February 1973. But Phil was incensed. Years later, he lamented, "I hated it that for years that was the only song we were known for. It was like a novelty song, like Yellow Submarine." The song was simultaneously their salvation and their prison. It gave them time to find their true sound and a new record label, but pigeonholed them as a novelty act. Success, Phil was learning, could be its own kind of trap. The sound that would define Thin Lizzy, their legendary twin guitar attack, was born from a beautiful accident. During the recording of their 1975 album Fighting, something went wrong in the studio. An engineer unintentionally left an effect on one of the tracks, creating an unexpected harmony between the guitars. Instead of frustration, the band felt revelation. They loved this accidental sound so much that they began intentionally writing melodies to accentuate dual lead guitars. This studio mistake became the sonic blueprint for their legacy. It's a perfect metaphor for Thin Lizzy's entire career, finding brilliance in chaos, creating beauty from crisis. With their sound solidified, commercial breakthrough finally arrived in 1976 with the album Jailbreak and its signature track, The Boys Are Back in Town. But here's what most people don't know about their biggest hit. It was never supposed to be a single. The band's label thought The Boys Are Back in Town was too aggressive for radio. They originally chose another track, Running Back, for release. But when an influential San Francisco radio station began spinning The Boys, the phones lit up. The label had no choice but to pivot. The lyrics hold an even deeper meaning than most fans realize. They weren't inspired by general camaraderie, but by Phil's friends from his mother's hotel in Manchester, specifically members of a notorious local group of gangsters known as the Quality Street Gang. This wasn't just a feel-good tune about friends returning. It was a celebration of outlaw loyalty and brotherhood that Phil knew from his own life. The song that made them famous was, at its core, about his perpetual quest for belonging, the same theme that had driven him since childhood in Crumlin. From 1976 to 1979, Thin Lizzy was at the height of their powers. The classic lineup of Lynott, Gorham, Robertson, and Downey became one of rock's most exhilarating live acts. They were headlining Reading Festival, performing for massive crowds. Their legendary reputation was immortalized on 1978's double album, Live and Dangerous, consistently ranked as one of the greatest live albums of all time. Though controversy would later surround producer Tony Visconti's extensive use of overdubs, the raw power was undeniable. But just as worldwide domination seemed within reach, a series of tragic, self-inflicted incidents began derailing their progress, particularly in America. In 1976, Phil contracted hepatitis while touring the U.S., forcing show cancellations. In 1977, Brian Robertson broke his hand in a bar fight, calling off another tour. Gary Moore, who'd replaced Robertson, abruptly quit mid-tour. As drummer Brian Downey later said, these repeated setbacks were the death knell for Thin Lizzy in America. Promoters and record labels, unimpressed by the self-sabotage, pulled back their support. The underlying cause was becoming impossible to ignore. Drug addiction was swamping the band. Guitarist Scott Gorham points to the Black Rose album sessions in 1979 as when heroin truly took hold, though Brian Robertson claims it was present from 1976, possibly the real cause of Phil's hepatitis. Phil's songwriting became a confessional diary of his struggles. Fans point to veiled references in songs like Dancing in the Moonlight. Later tracks like Dear Lord and Got to Give Up became explicit, heartbreaking pleas for freedom from addiction. The transformation in his lyrics was stark and painful to witness. Early Thin Lizzy songs celebrated rebellion and romance. The Boys Are Back in Town was about camaraderie and swagger. But as the 1980s progressed, Phil's writing became increasingly introspective and desperate. Dear Lord from the 1983 album Thunder and Lightning contained some of the most raw, honest lyrics he ever penned. Lines like, "Dear Lord, I need some guidance, I've lost my way," weren't just song lyrics. They were genuine prayers from a man who knew he was losing himself to addiction. The irony was devastating. Phil had always used songwriting as therapy, a way to process his feelings of alienation and search for belonging. Now, as his personal life crumbled, his art became more honest and powerful than ever. Critics noted that his later work possessed an emotional depth that his earlier hits, for all their energy and charm, had never achieved. Band members watched helplessly as Phil documented his own decline in real time through his music. Scott Gorham later said it was like watching someone write their own obituary, one song at a time. The man who had once written about mythical warriors and street-smart rogues was now writing about his own mortality and the demons he couldn't escape. His music transformed from entertainment into a raw, tragic chronicle of his decline. The poet who had once written about mythical Celtic warriors was now documenting his own battle, one he was losing. The final albums, Chinatown, Renegade, and Thunder and Lightning, are masterpieces of confessional rock, but they're almost too painful to listen to, knowing what we know now. Each song feels like a cry for help that went unanswered. By 1983, citing the band's music as having grown predictable, Phil made the difficult decision to disband Thin Lizzy. His solo career showed promise, but his post-Lizzy band, Grand Slam, couldn't secure a record deal due to extensive drug use among the members. On Christmas Day 1985, Phil Lynott collapsed from a drug and alcohol binge at his home. His estranged wife Caroline rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. Diagnosed with septicemia, his body had been ravaged by years of substance abuse. The final years had been particularly brutal. Phil's solo career showed promise initially. His 1982 album, the Phil Lynott Album, contained some genuinely moving material, including collaborations with members of Ultravox and Japan. But by 1984, his post-Lizzy band, Grand Slam, was struggling to secure a record deal. Industry insiders who knew Phil during this period describe a man caught between his public persona and private pain. He'd built his entire identity around being the charismatic frontman, the Celtic warrior poet. Admitting weakness or asking for help felt like betraying everything he'd worked to become. The irony wasn't lost on those close to him. Phil had spent his childhood feeling like an outsider, then used that pain to create art that made him beloved by millions. But success hadn't healed those original wounds. It had simply given him new ways to avoid confronting them. His friend and bandmate, Scott Gorham, later recalled the heartbreak of watching Phil's decline. He was fighting demons that went way back to his childhood. The drugs weren't the disease, they were just how he was trying to treat the disease. Phil Lynott died on January 4th, 1986, at the tragically young age of 36, from heart failure and pneumonia. Ireland's first rock poet was gone. But the final act of his story isn't one of pure tragedy. Phil had written 2 songs titled Sarah, one for his grandmother, one for his newborn daughter. These songs reveal the tender man behind the rock star persona, someone who understood love and loss in equal measure. After his death, his mother Philomena became the tireless keeper of the Thin Lizzy flame. She refused to let her son's story end in darkness, working tirelessly to preserve his legacy and share the full complexity of who he was. She authored a moving memoir, My Boy, and was central to creating his life-sized bronze statue in Dublin in 2005. The statue, located outside one of Phil's favorite pubs, has become a pilgrimage site. Every January, fans from around the world leave flowers, a living memorial to a man who transformed his search for belonging into timeless art. Thin Lizzy's twin guitar sound became foundational to hard rock and heavy metal. Metallica's cover of Whiskey in the Jar brought Phil's music to a new generation. Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, U2 all carry traces of his influence. Phil Lynott's story is more than rock and roll narrative. It's a profound study in identity, struggle, and the enduring power of art. He wasn't born with Celtic heritage. He created it. He didn't find belonging in the world. He built his own world through music. The mixed-race outsider from Crumlin became Ireland's first true rock poet, proving that sometimes our greatest weaknesses become our greatest strengths. His words, his music, and his story continue to echo on the wind, exactly as he would have wanted. What's your favorite Thin Lizzy song? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Untold stories.